So, just some background. I'm a male, and I'm currently 25 and still living within 15 miles of my old house. This happened when I was about 8 or 9, making my sister at the time 5 or 6. We lived in a quiet neighborhood that once I grew up, I found out was actually a lower income part of town. However, we had some wonderful neighbors, and it was thanks to these neighbors that a lot of potentially negative situations were avoided. At that time, my dad was working an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. job, and my mother was a secretary at a hospital, which meant that during the day she was often at work. Usually my sister and I had a babysitter, but once I reached about 8 or 9, I began to be old enough to look out for us without a babysitter. Now, mind you, this was the 90's, which certainly were not safe, but much safer than they are now. Also, we had the previously mentioned neighbors, who generally did a good job of keeping an eye on us and our house. This particular incident was one of the first times I was charged to babysit my sister. She was in her high chair eating whatever my mom had left for us when I got a knock at our front door. Now, this was strange, since we never got visitors on a regular basis, other than the boy across the street who would want us to come out and play, but he usually just yelled my name while knocking. I was young and naive, and decided to open the door. There was a locked screen door beyond that. I left that closed and locked. Outside was a middle-aged man. I hardly remember his facial features or even body type. I remember his yellow shirt and dirty jeans. Can I help you?" I asked innocently, no alarm bells going off yet. "Hey there, are your parents home?" Alright, my first alarm bell. My parents teaching me not to trust strangers rushed through my head, but I still didn't quite fully grasp the potential danger here. My mom went to the store. She'll be back any minute." A weird half-lie. I could have said she was here, but in the shower, or that she was laying down upstairs. I'm glad I didn't tell him that she wouldn't be back for quite a few hours, but looking back, it's scary how naive I was. "Hey, well, that's no problem. Hey, so my dog went missing, and I think it went back into your backyard. Do you mind if I come in and we can go check it out?" Okay, so I may have been dumb, but I wasn't that dumb. There was no way in hell I was letting this stranger into my house, especially with my sister there. She was my first thought. Sure, I didn't want to have any harm fall on me, but she was my sister, and it was my job to keep her safe. I should have closed the door right there and then, but once again, I went with the less safe but not totally stupid route. "Well, the gate should be unlocked. If you want to go check the backyard, you can," and promptly closed the door. Now, of course I was very curious if there was any stray dog in my backyard. Dogs are great, even with the weird guy being around. I was pretty interested to see how his search in the backyard went, so I decided to go check in the back window and see if there were actually a dog, and if so, if the man would catch it. Now at this point, I'm sure you have figured out that there was no dog, and when I looked back out the window, I could see almost the entire yard, including the gate. The man wasn't there. This was a mere seconds after I had closed the door on him. I waited for a few minutes, but he never showed up. After about 5 minutes, there was another knock on my door. This time I was much more wary, and I didn't like this guy showing up. I was pretty tired of the whole ordeal, but I still had to fully grasp the situation. I kept the chain lock on the door and cracked it open. Did you find your dog?" Again, I can't remember his facial features, so I really can't recall his expression, but I remember his tone was a bit desperate as well as annoyed. "No, I looked all over the yard and I couldn't find him. I have a picture in my car if you want to take it, just in case you see him." Nope, no more. I still didn't understand abduction, but I certainly was not going to go anywhere outside of the house with this stranger. I told him that he can leave a picture in the mailbox, and we will keep an eye out, once again, promptly closing the door on him. What followed is what really creeps me out to this day. Looking back, I was freaked out that I had come that close to exposing my sister and myself to danger, but this scared the shit out of me. Suddenly there was more knocking on my door. Not the screen door separating the door itself. Like I mentioned previously, the screen door was locked, and unless that was open, it was impossible to knock on the door itself. It freaked me the fuck out, and I took my sister to my bedroom and crept back out to the kitchen, where I could see the whole front yard, and I saw the man quickly getting back into his car, while my saint of a next-door neighbor, Joan, stood in her front lawn smoking and watching him intently. Also, it turns out he had ripped a corner of the screen door and had unlocked the screen door that way. My dad later just thought it was wear and tear, or us kids being kids. It took a long time for me to add it all up, and honestly, I had forgotten about it for a long time. When I finally remembered it all, I couldn't even believe my own memories. I am still debating with myself to actually tell my parents now. I wouldn't want to unnecessarily upset them, but maybe it is important to tell the story to my two younger sisters, one of whom is getting married soon, just as a life lesson. If anyone has any advice, I would love to hear it. In 1998, I was in my first semester of college. It was 35 miles north of a sleepy farm town I come from, and I had the option to stay in the dorms shared with the community college 1 block over, or make the commute. I chose the drive. I had a truck, my parents' gas card, and for the first time in my life, the ability to leave home and go wherever I wanted. That being the case, I didn't always go straight to and from my classes. Some days I'd take the highway, others I'd hit every out-of-the-way back road I could find. Not having to be on anyone's schedule but my own led to some strange decisions that older people would find funny. A good example of this would be stopping at the grocery store on my way home one night, at midnight, with no apparent reason other than not wanting to go home just yet. Being a lifelong gearhead, I went right to the magazine rack to check out the latest car stuff. It was there that my creepy encounter took place. I wasn't there long, but had gotten pretty deep into an article on some hot rod when I felt the presence of another person. I glanced up and found a tall guy in what I would call a sloppy dress. He was wearing a gray suit and tie, but it looked kind of dirty. He had long, greasy hair worn slicked back and a perfect 70s porn stash. As I flipped through my magazine, I came to realize that he was staring at me, never making eye contact directly, but when he thought I wasn't looking, his head turned in my direction. After a minute or two, he broke the silence with a "Hi there," and put a little too much effort into a cheesy smile. I responded with a hi and went about my business. As we stood there, it gradually dawned on me that this guy was interested in me and was checking me out. I remember thinking he must have been pretty desperate because I'm 180 degrees from being hot and consider myself fugly at best. All the same, I wasn't interested. In spite of zero luck with the ladies, I was 100% straight. He took a step towards me, and although I appeared focused on my reading, I was thinking of ways to tell him he wasn't my type, without coming off sounding like a total jerk. I mean, my parents had been brought up to believe that homosexuals were something to be feared, that they possess the ability to turn straight men into wanting to leave their wives and family in favor of the deviant lifestyle. I like to think I'm part of a much more understanding generation, but at the same time, I was getting really creeped out. He kept taking steps towards me, pretending to check out one magazine and then the next. It was much less convincing when he picked up one on model trains and then switched over to a bridal magazine. He broke the awkward silence with a, "Are you a college student?" I was a little weirded out because I had literally just come from a class a couple weeks into my first semester. I was thinking, how could he know that? But replied with, "Yeah," and then kept reading. I was trying to come up with a way to set my magazine down and leave without looking like I was running from him. The last thing I wanted to do was hurt the guy's feelings. Then he took things from mildly strange to all-out creepy with, "I own my own business and have a lot of nice, strong young men working for me. I like to hire young guys for the kind of work I do." I nodded and remained expressionless, even though I was starting to panic. "I might have a job for you too if you'd be interested." He patted his pockets, doing the worst imitation of searching for something, then said, "I don't seem to have a business card on me, but I'm parked right out front. If you've got a sec and come walk to my car with me, I can get you my contact info." The way he paused on the word job scared the hell out of me. I mean, if he was trying to pick me up, that was one thing, but to bullshit me with this whole thing about a job offer at midnight in a nearly deserted store was a burning red flag. This was my chance. I responded with, "That's great, but I've already got a job and barely have enough time to maintain it and my classwork, but thanks for the offer." With that, I put my magazine down and started for the exit. I didn't look back until I was nearing the registers. When I did, I noticed he had left a magazine rack and was speed walking in my direction. He looked left and right frantically, as if searching for witnesses. I picked up the pace, and once I rounded the corner and was out the door to the parking lot, flat out hauled my ass to my vehicle. As I fumbled for and nearly dropped my keys, I looked to the store and saw him in the light of the entrance, searching for me. I was absolutely terrified. When he spotted me, he began jogging towards me. I jumped in, fired up my pickup, and burned rubber out of the lot. When I glanced in my mirror, I saw another man, eerily dressed in a similar getup, running towards him. They appeared to be talking, my would-be abductor pointing in my direction. Then they disappeared into the darkness. Thankfully, the store was located right next to the highway on-ramp. I ran a red light and floored my old pickup to 90 miles per hour. When it appeared as though nobody was following me, I bailed back off the expressway and took side roads the rest of the way home. I didn't tell my folks what had happened. Needless to say, I may have continued to take different routes home when I was bored, but no more late-night store stops. This happened sometime in the late 90s. When I was 19, I moved from Oregon to Florida to be with my boyfriend at the time. Don't ever do that. I was thinking white sand beaches and Mickey Mouse, but instead got the swamp, bugs and dirt roads. It was a huge shock to the system. We lived in this little town called Hawthorne, just outside of Gainesville. It's very small, one stoplight and 4 stores. A dollar store, Steve's Market, Eckerd's Pharmacy, and Sonny's Barbecue. Whoopee. Anyway, I got a job at Eckerd's in the middle of the town. It was next to the grocery store, so everybody shopped there. After about 3 months or so working there, I walked in to start my shift one day when the manager pulled me into his office. Laid out on his desk was about 30 to 40 open letters, all addressed by hand to me. "Do you know this person?" my manager asked. No. "Read one." So I picked the cheerful yellow one. Inside were 2 handwritten letters and a magazine cut out of a woman with long blonde hair, just like me. As the Eckerd manager watched on, I read the letter. I skipped around a lot out of confusion, desperately trying to find out why I'm in this room. From what I read, it was mostly someone imagining what spending time with me would be like. A lot of it was sexual in nature. There were descriptions and comments about my hair, washing it, smelling it, and something about the moonlight. A few sentences were highlighted, others were underlined. My first thought was, am I getting fired? Do you know this David Elrod?" I said yes, I think so. The tall, lanky guy with thick glasses and frizzy dark blonde hair. The regular who comes in a couple times a week to pick up Diet Coke and medication for his mom. Late 20s and obviously socially or mentally challenged. On rare occasions, he would make small talk as I ran up his soda. Once or twice, he would linger at my register or stare at me, but I figured he was just trying to adjust his eyes or had poor social skills. Harmless, compared to some of the other people I had met in Florida, so I didn't pay him any mind until that day in Eckerd's office. I knew he wrote the letters because of a strange encounter 2 weeks earlier. While working, he came up behind me and caressed my hair. I had to remove it from his hands and he apologized. After telling my manager this, he informed me that the customer was going to be banned from the store and I was being sent home while they worked out the details. What details? Confused, I walked out of the store and drove home. So that was strange. 2 hours after I got home from my non-shift at work, there was a knock on my door. I looked out the window and see what resembles a SWAT team. What the fuck? I saw men in tactical gear with large weapons, 2 men dressed in suits, and several uniformed cops. In what seemed like slow motion at the time, I opened the door. A female officer holds up a few oddly familiar letters. "Can we come in and talk to you about these?" Realizing everyone in town has read the letters, I wanted to pass the fuck out. I don't even know the guy. Out of the corner of my eye, I see my boyfriend shooting me dirty looks from the bedroom. The female officer mentions getting the letters from Eckerd's and attempting to issue a trespassing notice. They wanted to speak to him directly, she says, because her whole department is aware of David. The officers confronted him at his residence and attempted to evoke the trespassing notice from Eckerd's store. Apparently, he was not happy about this. He insisted for over 45 minutes how this was all a big mistake and I wanted to talk to him. He was so combative and persistent, they decided to pursue stalking charges. Stalking charges? She continues. You need to be aware that David killed and partially dismembered his mother when he was 12 years old. He was released from a juvenile psychiatric facility less than 4 years ago. We found disturbing materials at his home, she continued. We believe he's been stalking you. My mind kept wandering. David was arrested the next day for stalking after he was found in the Eckerd's parking lot, but the last official word was he went back to the psychiatric hospital, at least temporarily. I didn't have the chance to read the letters in full before they were entered into some vault of evidence, nor did they explain what they found at his house, so I never had the complete picture of what was happening. My boyfriend at the time was a huge dick about the whole thing, so I moved back to Oregon a week later. Besides, who wants to hang around when Norman Bates is fixated on you? This was in the late 90s, and me and my friend were over at another friend's house, both around the same age, 17 to 18. At around midnight, we both set off home, and we typically walked everywhere. Neither of us drove, so it was really our only option. We walked part of the way back together, and then split off in our separate directions. He lived out in the country, and the walk back to his house was a long and pretty vacant one, a long stretch of main road past a cemetery, followed by an almost pitch black walk down a 1-mile road, which led to his village. His house was the second house of the village, so after that trek he'd be home. After splitting up, it took about 10 minutes before I got a call from him. He said a guy had pulled up next to him in a car and said, "Hey, do you want a lift?" His initial reaction was of confusion. He didn't know this guy, but also, his car was full of kids. 4 kids, ranging from the age of 5 and 14. He said he told him that he was fine, and the guy's face just changed and he shouted, "Yeah, well, you didn't fucking look like you needed one." At that point, he sped off. As he was explaining this, he says, "Oh fuck, he's here again." I immediately turn on heel and start walking back. I partially hear the conversation on the phone. The guy pulls up alongside of him again and says, "Do you want a fucking lift now?" My friend again responds with a no. Then the guy says, "Are you a hermaphrodite?" My friend, confused, just said, "What?" To which the guy responded, "Do you have both male and female organs?" To which my friend simply responded no, and then the guy took off in his car again. At this point, I'm racing to catch up to where he had got to. He was just past the cemetery on the long main road, before he got to the point where he'd have to turn off onto the mile of dark road. On catching up with him, he was visibly freaked out. He said the weirdest part is that the kids in the car just seemed unfazed by it, like this guy just does this kind of thing and they're used to it. They weren't laughing, they weren't even really paying attention. It was all just so bizarre. We started walking together and got to the mile of the dark road. It's not a nice place to walk at the best of times, and the previous events just made us both more nervous, but we pressed on. About halfway down the path, we hear a car coming up from behind us. It's the guy again. He's absolutely racing down the road and comes to a screeching halt next to us. Again, he winds the window down. I clock the guy, and he looks like the most typical early 30s dad of that time. Bleach blonde Eminem style hair, football top. Basically, you wouldn't have to look twice at him in the street in that particular era. He eyed me up and says, "Who the fuck is this?" Before either of us can say a word, he screams, "Do you want to fucking fight?" And again, before even answering that question, he takes off again, speeding down the road into the village where my friend lives. We now had to walk directly toward where he had gone, so we sprint it, knowing his house isn't so far away. We rush into his house and stake out his bedroom window, which looks out over the only road leading out of the village. No car left in the hour we sat there. The guy must live in his village, we concluded. I stayed at his house that night, and early the next morning we went looking for the car. His village is made up about 4 separate cul-de-sacs, and we could see no sign of the vehicle. Whether it was parked in a garage or not, who knows? but it all started to feel like an episode of The Twilight Zone. This happened to me when I was 5 or 6. It was the mid-90s, when the Spice Girls, Nintendo 64, and the PS1 were the latest trend. Anyway, I'm the third of 4 children. A big sister, who was 11 at the time, a big brother, who was 7, me and my little sister, who were around 3 and 4. My mom had a friend, let's call her Linda. My siblings and I loved to go to Linda's place. Also my mom, she enjoyed the grown-ups' conversation with Linda. We also loved to play with Linda's daughters, Sam and Lisa. We probably went there very often, especially on weekday days before the sun went down. It was a 75-foot long walk to my mom's friend's house. Our neighborhood was quiet and has a kind of weird configuration. Some houses are surrounded by woods and some are not. Our home was covered by the woods. So you may guess now that we had a new habit, going to Linda's at the same time around 3:30 p.m. and returning home around 5:15 p.m. almost every day. Now, here's the creepy part of my story. One day, my mom's siblings and I, Linda and her daughters, decided to take a little walk around our neighborhood at 4 p.m. We were walking and chatting about kid stuff when a woman greeted us in the sidewalk with a try-to-charm childish voice. She said something along the lines of, "Hello, children. What's going on?" It was worth noticing the creepy woman was avoiding either my mom or Linda. She centered her gaze and conversation at the younger ones. It was just weird, because she was a complete stranger, and I'm pretty sure neither my mom or Linda saw her before. Let me describe this creepy lady. 90s shady look, probably she was in her late 20s, bleached gold hair, denim shorts, pastel-colored long-sleeve t-shirt with some flower designs, and she was wearing sunglasses. My mom noticed her and hurried us to Linda's place. We entered to Linda's without any problem. We started to play as nothing happened. My mom and Linda had a cup of tea and some chat. In general, we forgot about the lady. Probably she just wanted new and young friends, right? A couple of hours passed, so my mom decided we had enough fun, so she called us downstairs and told us it was time to return home. We said goodbye to Linda and her daughters and returned home, forgetting about that weird encounter. It was around 5:20 p.m. and it was getting dark very quickly. By the way, it was the time of the year that the sun decides to set early, leaving us with low light to our path. We started to walk to our home. My brothers were chatting and playing. My mom was carrying my younger sister in her carriage, and me, of course, thinking about Tom and Jerry or some other cartoon at the time, oblivious to my surroundings. We arrived to our place, precisely to our front door. My mom pulled down the brakes of my sister's carriage so she can open up the doorhouse without any problems. Suddenly, my older brother noticed something strange in the woods. It was a figure hiding. It was her. Behind the trees was the same bleached gold-haired woman. My siblings alerted my mom about this creeper. My mom inserted the key into the keyhole and hurried us all inside the house, locking the doors safe. I was confused. "What's the matter?" I asked. My mom said something to me along the lines of, "She's a stranger. She's acting weird and only God knows what she's up to." It was worth noting that our house had 2 front doors, so to speak. The first one, the garage door, and the second door, that gives a clear view to the woods without any chance of anyone entering the house, having this second door as a safety door. 5 or so minutes went by. I was curious if the old lady was gone, so I peeked the second door that gave me the view to the woods, and she was still there, She was covering herself with a tree. I noticed something disturbing. Her smile. She wasn't smiling in a good way, so to speak. She had this satanic smile that still gives me chills to this day. She stared at me as if we were playing hide and seek, and I was trying to find her. She still had the sunglasses on her evil face. I thought, why is she wearing sunglasses? It's now completely dark. Now I'm terrified. What would happen when my dad comes home from work? Will she pull a gun or something? Thankfully, when my dad came home, she was not there. I don't remember if my parents called the cops or did something about the matter, but I'm pretty sure about the evil woman's intentions weren't for anything good. Why she waited till we came home? Why this woman had those freaking sunglasses on when it was dark outside? Now thinking as a grown-up man, she was probably trying to cover her identity. Was she planning to kidnap me or one of my siblings? Was she into human trafficking? Was she planning to kill us and sell our internal organs? Or was she in some messed up cult? One thing is for sure, we never saw her again, and after that creepy encounter, we restrained ourselves going to Linda's place for a long period of time. I'm so thankful that my brother saw the woman, and my mother was there to hurry us inside. If it was not by God's grace, I'd never experienced this wonderful childhood I had and treasure to this day. Please, be aware of your surroundings, especially when walking with your little ones.